Okay, good afternoon once again. We have reached the closing session of the Pears Foundation webinar in Plant Sciences. And our last speaker will be our distinguished guest, Tesfay Araya from Ethiopia. Tesfay has his BSc degree in dryland crop science from Mekelle University in Ethiopia. Then he did his MSc here at the international program of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem in Rehovot. And currently he is a PhD student on conservation agriculture in Ghent University in Belgium. Apart from his studies, he also gained some work experience as a research officer on agronomy in Tigray Agricultural Research Institute in Ethiopia, as well as a lecturer in the Department of Crop and Horticultural Science at Mekelle University in Ethiopia. So I'm very happy to have him with us here today. Tesfay, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for Hebrew University for giving me this opportunity and covering my course from Ethiopia here. In this presentation, I will talk about the effects of conservation agriculture on runoff, soil loss, and crop productivity in the northern Ethiopian highlands. What's the problem? The problem, there is a land degradation in the northern part of Ethiopia, and it is caused because of farmers has harvest straw yield completely, leaving no crop residue. And in addition to that, farmers, they sent their livestock to the completely harvested crop field to overgraze again the cropland. In addition to this, farmers, they repeatedly plow their land, and as a result of this repeated plowing for preparation of sowing, it increases the oxidation, and as a result, it reduces the organic matter in the soil. So in general, this all contribute to the reduction of organic matter in the soil. As a result, it makes the soil susceptible for runoff and soil loss. I will talk on vert soils. So the vert soil is very important soil in Ethiopia. It's the second important soil. It covers 25% of the central highland Ethiopia. And the major limitation in crop production on vert soils is because of there is periodic drought, there is dry spell, there is a rain for some time that creates waterlogging. So this periodic waterlogging and periodic droughts are very common in one cropping season. In addition to this, there is high runoff rates from vert soils. Rain-fed farming agriculture is the dominant one in Ethiopia as a whole, and the rainfall is actually erratic and insufficient, especially in the northern part of Ethiopia. And the only input water is rainfall, but much of is lost by runoff as blue water. Actually, the deep drainage is very small in vert soils, but much of the rain is lost as runoff. And the reason for this is because the soil is physically deteriorated for the reasons I explained earlier, and there are no control measures. So if we can increase the infiltration rate, and if we can increase the infiltration rate, we can reduce runoff. And if we can increase the infiltration, and if we can improve the water holding capacity of the soil, then we can increase the green water in the soil, in the root zone, and it can be available for crops so that crop yield can increase. So in order to increase crop productivity, in situ soil water management practices need improvement. Conservation agriculture in combination with other in situ conservation practices can improve the soil hydrology. So until recently, there are no practice of implementing conservation agriculture in the northern Ethiopia. So what does it mean, conservation agriculture? Conservation agriculture, there are three principal important components, and one of them is reduction in tillage. The final goal is actually direct seeding. And second is there must be ample amount of crop residue in the soil, so that there must actually to protect the soil from erosion and to enhance, to increase the fertility for sustainable crop production. And the third is actually there must be crop protection. The current practice in the region is actually there is overgrazing, as I explained earlier. There is repeated ploughing, so we can change it from this current practice into no tillage or no disturbance, and with the supplementation of ample amount of crop residue and crop protection, then we can actually improve the yield. So here you can see how conservation agriculture and conventional agriculture and conservation agriculture differ. When you look at the conventional agriculture, there is intensive tillage. When you go from the conventional agriculture towards the conservation agriculture, then there is a reduction of disturbance of the soil. And here there is a disturbance of the soil, and as a result of it increases the oxidation, and it reduces organic matter, and as a result it makes susceptible the soil to erosion. So here there is direct seeding with help of seeders. So why do we need research? Because there are so many publications, informations on conservation agriculture. Because it has found that the experiments in different parts of the world were not consistent because of the differences in socioeconomic setups and soil types, climate, crops, and ploughing implementers. So because of this difference, the results in conservation agriculture were not consistent. So now we carried out the experiment. We carried out the experiment in small landholding size and in small landholding size and in a verti soil. And the climate is actually semi-arid climate, and we have used the crop protections that are available in the highlands of Ethiopia, including the indigenous crop called teff. And the implements we have used is the oxen-drawn ard plough. We call it the maresha. So our objective is actually to see if there are differences between conservation agriculture and conventional tillage practices in terms of runoff and soil loss, in terms of in-situ water conservation, in terms of soil quality, grain yield, and straw yield, because the grain yield, the grain and the straw yield is also important for livestock. So our objective is to test the indigenous conservation practices using the ard-plough maresha in combination the widely known knowledge on conservation agriculture. So the experiment is done in the northern part of Ethiopia. So there are three, in two locations there are three experimental sites. And actually I'm going to present only the one from the rainfall from one site. Here also we have for another site in one location actually. So here we grow twice during the irrigation time and during the rainy season. What I'm going to present is actually the results that we obtained from this. This is a picture from the Google. So this is the layout of the experiment. The plot size is actually 90 meter by 5 meter. So we have the runoff collector at each plot, at the end of each plot in. So the runoff is collected actually here, And the slope of the plot is 3%. From 2005 to 2007, it was a two replication experiment, but later from 2008 we have increased the replication into 3. So here is during measurement. So every runoff, every 24 hours before 8 a.m. we measure the amount of runoff collected into the trench. In addition to this, we also actually collect samples by stirring the runoff collected in the trench with plastic bottles, and we'll filter them, and this helps us to quantify the amount of soil loss from each plot. So we have 3 treatments. So one of the treatment is actually the conventional tillage as a control. So in this treatment, we have at least 3 times ploughing, per year. But it can increase depending on the type of crop and type of season. For example, it can increase for teff. The tillage number can increase for teff. And if the year is wetter, actually, then there is more ploughing. And we didn't leave any crop residue in this treatment because farmers do not leave any residue. So this is a control treatment. So we do everything as farmers do in the area, in the study area. So here you can see farmer ploughing plowed land already. The second treatment is actually, we call it tarwah. It's with a plus sign because it is modified. It's not exactly the local practice. There is a traditional local in situ water conservation practice called tarwah. So the plus sign is because we have modified it. Farmers in the area, they use this tarwah, the traditional in situ water conservation technique for teff, but with repeated ploughing. And all is similar to the conventional, except they make furrows in between 2 to 4 meters. So tillage was done here only once at sowing. And since we modify this treatment into conservation agriculture, so we leave also 30% of the crop residue on the plots, which we define them tarwah. And 2 liters per hectare glyphosate was applied in order to control pre-emergent weeds, starting actually from 2007, but we didn't use the glyphosate before 2007. Here is just to show you the picture how tarwah system is applied in teff crop in the farmer's field. Here it's a dordoro, we call it dordoro, but it is again modified into conservation agriculture. Traditionally, farmers actually some 200 kilometers far from the study area. Farmers, they use it actually for crops like fenugreek, wheat, and teff. However, this was not actually common practice in the study area. Anyway, it is a local knowledge also some kilometers far from the study area. So here it has a permanent raised beds and furrows, and it has the raised beds area actually on the top is 40 to 6 centimeter wide. And tillage was done only once, but here it's not uniform to all. It is only done by refreshing the furrows. There is no tillage on the top of the bed. So every year only, it's just only to refresh the furrows. But the beds were there since the establishment of the experiment. 30% of crop residue was left as standing stable like that of tarwah, and 2 liters per hectare glyphosate was applied to control pre-emergent weeds. Here is just show you the experimental, actually the experimental, the bed and furrow. Here it's at demonstration of the farmers when they demonstrate actually for the dordoro system. This is a picture that shows that dordoro ploughing for fenugreek production when they use it actually locally. Here is just show how much the crop residue are living on the cropland every year in each treatment of conservation agriculture types. when you come to the results, we characterize the rainfall during the last 6 years, actually starting from 2005. So we run the rainfall of 30 years rainfall using the rainbow analysis, and it shows actually it shows that there were the daytime period for actually for 2006 was 5.3. It can be repeated every 5.3 years. But when you see in 2008 it was drought here, it was very low. So generally when we look at, there was high rainfall per year for the 2006 followed by 2007. But when you look at the rain that was during the growing season, that is from June to September, that's higher again in 2006 followed by 2010. And when you look at the 30 years mean rainfall, I think most of the study periods were higher than the mid period. That's in 2005, 2006, 2007, and 2010. 2008 and 9 were below, actually below the 30 years mean rainfall. So here, just to look at the grain yield we obtained, beginning from the first year, there was higher yield. We grow in the first year wheat, and the yields were higher in the Dodoro system, followed by the Tarwa. So the conservation agriculture types were performing better than the conventional practices. So when we look at also the second year and the third year, that's in 2007 and 2009, actually for wheat cropping, still it was consistently higher in the Dodoro system. And the average yields also show, the serious average yields also show that still the conservation agriculture types were higher, especially in the Dodoro system, followed by the Tarwa. When we look at also barley, which was sown in 2008, still it is better, although it is drought year. Although it is drought year, the total yield, the total rainfall was very low, and the total crop was low, but still the yield in the Dodoro system was higher. Here also, when you look at for teff crop, it was vice versa. It was not found higher yield in the conservation agriculture type. So the highest yield we obtained was actually for the conventional tillage. I will explain later why we got higher yields in the conventional system as compared to the conservation agriculture types. Here also we have repeated teff in 2010, but here there was no significant difference between the treatments. However, there was actually slightly higher in the Tarwa system, followed by the Dodoro system. When you look at the 2 years average, still it was higher in the conventional system because the difference here were significantly higher in the conventional system. Here, why do we have lower yields in Dodoro in 2006? There are 2 reasons for this. One is the bed and furrow. The way teff is planted is once teff is very small seed with very small seed. So once the land preparation is finished, then on top teff is sown. So it is exposed on the top of the soil. So it is exposed to erosion. So all the seeds from the bed were washed away by rain into the furrow. So they were affected by waterlogging. So most of the crop was on the furrow. So it was affected by waterlogging. In addition to this, there were higher records of wheat in the bed in the Dodoro system. This is the Dodoro, or we call it sometimes permanent bed. So in the permanent bed or in the Dodoro system, there were higher weed records because there was no herbicide applied actually to kill the pre-emergent weeds in this year. Why do we get slightly higher? Why we get teff yields were not significantly higher in the Dodoro or Tarwa system? It is also similar. The problem is similar to the I mentioned earlier that in 2010 also the seeds were washed to the furrow, and most of the crops were grown in the furrow, and as a result they were affected by waterlogging. So if you can maintain, however, if you can still maintain the seeds on the bed, then there is a possibility that teff yield can be higher in the conservation agriculture plots. Here is just to show you, it's difficult to compare crop yields between one year to another year because they are different crops. But here is just we use cumulative relative productivity index. So it shows for the Dordoro system, it was increasing starting from the third year. You know, there were higher crop productivity index in the Dordoro system, followed by the Tarwa system. Here is just show you that we have started to score the performance of the crop yield in the by farmers. Actually, farmers, we invite farmers, local farmers, to evaluate the crop performance in each plot. So they were scoring higher for the Dordoro system, followed by the actually the Tarwa system. So they give list to the actually for the conventional system. So here is also about the straw yield. So it has similar trend to the actually to grain yield. Here we have used NDVI also to score the biomass yield. So here also it shows that there were higher NDVI readings for the Dordoro system, followed by the actually Tarwa system. So the least NDVI result was actually for the conventional system. NDVI is actually it gives 0 for no vegetation, and the maximum green leaves record is actually 1. It can be 0.9 or 1, and it is actually the difference between the near infrared minus red light over the sum of near infrared plus the red light. So it reads more, NDVI is higher more when the plants are green because it reflects, it absorbs more red light at the time. Here is there, does CA affect daily runoff? Yes, it affects the daily runoff. You can see here is the days after planting. Okay, here also the rainfall record days after planting. So here is the runoff depths every day when there is any runoff. So you can see here, although here you can see there is high rainfall amounts, but here the response is low. So the runoff at the beginning was actually in general low because it is fresh tillage. So fresh tillage, it has the capacity to absorb more water to reduce the runoff. But most of the rainfall occurs late in the growing season. What you see also is the Dordoro system was the runoff in the Dordoro system was the least, the minimum amount as compared to the others, and it was significant difference. And here is also the runoff coefficient, which shows clearly that the runoff coefficient was very small for the Dordoro system. Here is also about the soil loss, and it has similar trend. But when you look at the sediment concentration, you can see here more soil loss occurs at the beginning of the season, and later only the runoff is high. So the sediment concentration or the sediment loss is much higher at the beginning of the season because there is fresh tillage and there is a soil that is susceptible to be carried out by erosion. Here is just show you the runoff coefficient of the 6 years, the yearly runoff coefficients. So it was consistently higher runoff coefficient for the conventional system. It doesn't matter we grow wheat or barley. So all year it was higher consistently in the actually in the conventional system. So the 6 years mean runoff coefficient was 12 in Dordoro and 19 in Tarwa, while it was 25% in the conventional system. Here also it's the runoff amount. It has similar trend because runoff coefficient is runoff over rainfall. So it has similar, but the 6 years mean runoff was 42 millimeter in Dordoro and 68 millimeter in Tarwa, and 87 millimeter in conventional system. So it shows you that this Dordoro technique can reduce the amount of runoff by half, which is 40, more than even half. So this one is 87, and here is 42 millimeter. Here it shows the 6 years mean soil loss. It was similar trend to the runoff. So here we have 4 tons per hectare soil loss in the Dodoro system, while the soil loss in the conventional system was 17 tons per hectare, which is actually more than 4 times than the Dodoro system. So it significantly reduces soil loss. Here it just shows you that there was slightly an increment of organic matter in the Dodoro system as compared to the conventional system. Here is also to show you that the stability index was significantly higher for the Dodoro system. We have also followed the soil water content, and we were recording every 3-4 days for the water content. We have used a TDR in order to read the moisture content. We calibrate the TDR using the gravimetric water content. So what we see here is the cumulative soil water storage as well as the soil water storage. It was significantly higher almost throughout the growing season in the Dodoro system. So we have increased the water content in the root zone of the Dodoro system, the conservation agriculture types, as compared to the conventional system. Here is just to show you that there were highest records for the Dodoro. I mean the peak readings of the NDVI were corresponding to the peak moisture soil water content period. So as the water content in the soil starts to decline, then the NDVI recording were also declining. Here is just show you a photograph that is taken every in similar time, 15 minutes after 38.5 millimeter. So this is a conventional. All the water was actually going as runoff in the conventional system. While you see here still there is water in between the furrows in the Dodoro system. So the physical physical structures of the bed, it enables to drain the excess rains from the bed to the furrow and gives time to infiltrate into the soil. So here you see under demonstration actually. So what you see here is the furrows where the excess rain was draining to the furrow, and this reduces the problem of water logging when there is excess rain. And also it has a positive contribution to reduce the dry spell effect, because the excess water will be stored and stay there in the root for later use during dry spell. So it's actually this Dodoro system solves both the water logging problem I have mentioned in my first slide and the periodic drought or dry spell. We have also, you see, there are during ploughing, the marisha has to go through the furrows only to refresh the furrows. So it is also very fast to plough it. So farmers, they need 1 oxen day for 1 hectare in this type of technique, while they need 4 days for the conventional system. When I come to conclusion, then actually there was the grain yields were higher in the Dodoro system as compared to the conventional system, and still better in the Tarwa system as compared to the conventional system. But for teff it was not like that, as I explained earlier. So for runoff, there was very less amount in the Dodoro system as compared to the conventional system. But for water conservation, it was higher in the Dodoro system as compared to the conventional system. So much of the runoff harvesting is associated with the bed and furrow structure. The residue also reduces the flow velocity of the water and evaporation. Beds avoid temporary water logging problem, except for teff, because teff was washed to the furrow. Organic matter have shown also slightly higher in the Dodoro system as compared to the conventional system. there was weed infestation when there was teff. The soil loss was significantly lower in the Dodder system as compared to the conventional system, and it follows actually similar terrain to the runoff. And aggregate stability were higher for the Dodder system as compared to the conventional system. Reduction in drought power were also observed. That is, there is a reduction in oxygen density and straw demand. Animals were actually, farmers are forced to keep more animals because tillage requires a lot of animals. So in this case, because the ploughing pace is very fast, so it can reduce the oxygen density and the straw demand. We can recommend Torah as first step, but in long term we have to recommend the long term goal should be to actually to adopt the Dodder system. Farmers in the neighboring hood pick up bed and furrow system as it is as Dodder system, so they are adopting, they are learning from the experiment. So in general, to conclude, also minimum tillage plus crop residue plus crop rotation, it increases the organic matter and it improves the physical, chemical, and biological properties of soil. As a result, reduce runoff and soil loss, actually with the supplement of the physical bed structure in the Dodder system, and reduce land degradation, and finally, it can improve the crop productivity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tesfay, for this very interesting presentation. Let me ask the first question. Okay. Well, you've shown that in conservation tillage you do get higher yields in wheat at least. However, in conservation tillage, you have to leave some of the straw in the field.
Yes.
As far as I know, in Ethiopia, the straw is used for many purposes, either building huts or feeding the animals, etc. How do you estimate will be the acceptability of this technique by the farmers, and if it can be weighted on one hand actually the loss of the straw versus the gain in grain yield?
Yeah, actually I didn't present it here, but we have made the economic analysis, the partial budget analysis actually, and it shows that there are a lot of benefits from the conservation agriculture type of treatments. As you mentioned, there is a problem of that the straw is very important, economically important for their livestock. So farmers are not willing to leave the crop residue in their croplands. The reason for this is, one, there is open grazing. There is open grazing system, but what we are trying to show here is that it can work. It can increase yield. It can work. This technology can work in that area. So in the long term, when farmers actually perceive that in the long term they are increasing the crop yield, and also in the long term when they see that they don't need much labor actually for the conservation agriculture types, so in the long term they can adopt this technology. But since it's what they call it this no ploughing technique or conservation agriculture is a practice for lazy farmers, as some farmers mentioned, because a lazy farmer do not want to plough repeatedly his land. So it's a lazy practice. So the tradition for the last 1,000 years is actually to plough repeatedly. So in order to change this attitude and bring to conservation agriculture, it can take. But I'm sure in the long term, all the farmers will adopt it and use it, this technique.
I think one of the good things with the approach you took in this study is that your conservation treatments were a kind of modification of the traditional methods. I mean, not just saying, okay, traditional way, let's put something modern, but just modifying the traditional way, so it will, I believe it will increase the acceptance of these approaches by the farmers. Yes, please.
As far as I have known from the company of Ethiopians that
Yeah.
teff is the main crop of Ethiopia.
Yeah.
But as a conservationist, what would you suggest for the farmers of Ethiopia how to grow teff as a conservationist?
Yeah, so we know that the problem is because it is small seed and easily washed to the furrow. So we are suggesting a new way of sowing for teff, like, for example, to bury, to let it stick to the soil so that it will not easily wash it. So we can use bushes, okay, so that it can some distance can be buried to the soil. So in that way, if we are successful in maintaining the seeds on the bed, so we are sure that the teff yield will be doubled on the bed as compared to in the conventional system.
Thank you. One of my questions is on the setup of your experiment. You had two traditional practices with some modification. I would include the original practice as well. In this experiment, you have modified the traditional methods. You have two traditional methods. You modified them, but you didn't include the original practice. Probably so. In this experiment, we don't know whether the effect is coming from your modification or truly because of the traditional farmers' practice. Another question on top of Shuki's suggestion is that I don't think farmers will be willing to keep some of the reduce on their farm. So in this case, because in the area I know that wheat is not the main crop, I think, sorghum or maize. So if you
wheat is the main in the highlands of Ethiopia, wheat and barley are very common ones.
Okay, maybe in the area, in northern part of Ethiopia, sorghum is also important, right?
It's in the lowland.
Okay, in that case it may be true. So I was thinking in different ways that leaving some crop residue, if you think it in crop protection aspect, there may be problems leaving some crop residues on the land, like stock water, if you consider it as a maize or sorghum.
That's why
so in
crop rotation is there. That's why crop rotation is there. In order to avoid those pests problems. And also, as you said it, this is typical actually management of the land as farmers do in the steady area. So this is the conventional is actually, the conventional tillage is actually the control. This is what farmers do in the steady area. They plow repeatedly their land, and we do the same as they do. And we harvest the crop, the straw completely, and farmers also do the same. So this is our control, but the others, we modify them. We modify them. They are not anymore, actually, they are not anymore local practices. They are conservation agriculture type treatments. Although they have difference. The one, it has wider bed, and the other, it has permanent bed. So they are conservation agriculture type. We
because
modify them based on the principles.
You said because these are the traditional practices, right?
What makes them traditional is the way the furrows are actually prepared. For example, for the taro system you see here, the farmers also do the furrow system on teff crop. So we copy only this furrow, but we do not plow like the farmers 4 times or 5 times for teff. So what we do is just we only take this the name actually. Take these furrows and actually incorporate to our experiment. But we do not plow like them. We just our treatment is Tarwa Plus. That means it's already we modified it to conservation agriculture. We are plowing only once at sowing. So it's conservation agriculture with some conservation techniques.
I think in my belief, it would be better if you include the original practice, that is without modifying with your
Our
technique.
interest is to check whether conservation agriculture is working or not. It's not, our interest is not to check the water conservation techniques in the study area. Actually, we have another paper on it where we made a survey on the techniques, but the objective is here only to check whether conservation agriculture is working, or whether the principles of conservation agriculture can work in virgin soils in the northern Ethiopia or not. Did I get your?
Yeah, it's good. Maybe one more question, last question.
Okay.
I know that whenever you have minimum tillage, like for consecutive years, maybe you may not see. Actually, you have checked it for like 5 years. I think that's okay. But whenever you have minimum tillage, they affect the. I mean, there become a reduction in yield after several years. Like maybe after 5 or 6 years, you may need to plow the soil using conventional method. Because in some research, there has been evidence that minimum tillage, like for consecutive years, 5 years or 6 years, eventually you maybe end up with a decrease in yield, and after several years, maybe after 5 or 6 years, you may need conventional type of tillage. I'm not sure whether in 5 years you get in all years you have a high yield or not.
Yeah, that's what I try to show. We have seen higher grain yields even in teff, although it is not significant, but the yields were slightly higher in the Toroha system, actually, not in the Dodoro system. In the Toroha system, why in the Dodoro? Because the teff seed was washed to the furrow. So still we started in 2005, but I'm reporting the results in 2010. So these are actually a permanent, these yields are actually from a permanently kept plots. The plots were kept permanent. Okay, fixed. We didn't change the plots every year. Just they were kept permanent from starting from 2005 until 2010. So these are the yields. Still, we have the yield for this year with another crop. So we are continuing the research. What will happen in the long term if we implement every year the principles of conservation agriculture, the minimum tillage.
I wonder, especially with the application of teff, because in my area, for example, farmers have specific days for specific ploughing in order to get the, how can I say, the maximum amount of yield. So even they can plough it more than 5 times, I can say. So if this is practiced and everybody knows, if they didn't plough on the required day at the required time, even they can get lost their yield because of the weed. So do you think about the weed problem also?
That's what I'm saying here. Here, that's not true. But here we have to keep in mind that if we are not implementing the principles of conservation agriculture, which I explained them earlier, like reducing the soil disturbance and leaving ample amount of crop residue, and actually the crop rotation is also important. If we do these principles, then it's okay. But if we are not leaving, for example, ample amount of crop residue, it's much worse than the conventional. In that case, we have to plow. So what's here important is that we have to implement the principles properly. We have to leave ample amount of crop residue, and we have to disturb its minimum. We have to implement it in area where there is zero grazing system, or where farmers are convinced to do the zero grazing system, because animals should not go and graze there. So in this case, it's not necessary to plow many times. It's necessary to plow many times in the current practice they have. That means they are not living in crop residue. Okay, so they cannot they should not stop plowing this, with their current practice. But if they become willingness to leave crop residue, it's not necessary to plow.
Other questions? Thank you, Tesfay. Thank you very much.